purpose of this video is to show a little bit about some of the equipment in the lab here and how to use it. Okay, his first piece of equipment is a chop saw. It uses a rotary blade. It's replaceable. We cut carbon steel on it, round stock, pipe, steel, and it's just two buttons. There's an on, green, and a red, off. So when you push the green button, the blade starts rotating. Use the handle, push it down through the metal. There's a guard on it. The guard will automatically come up. Let the weight of the equipment push its way through the piece. Don't force it and don't let it drop onto the piece. So we're going to cut a piece of metal here and I'll show you how it goes. Okay, so first things first, we're going to take the piece of metal, put it into the vise. We slide it over, we'd make a mark on here where we want it to be cut. Push the clamp forward and lock it down into place. Push the green button. It's going to get a little noisy here and we're just going to let the blade do the cutting. Okay, be careful when you're picking up your piece over here because it's going to be pretty hot with all the friction that was generated with the wheel going around. When the wheel gets too small to cut through the piece, we're going to change the wheel out. Okay, to change the wheel out, we would want to clamp something on here like a pair of vice grips. And then you got a wrench that's going to go here and loosen up this nut. The nut is left-handed, so it doesn't come undone when the blade's rotating around. The other thing you can do is put a piece of 2x4 down here in the clamp. Put the blade down onto the 2x4 so that it doesn't rotate. Then you can take the nut off that way as well. So that's pretty much the chop saw. Thanks. Okay, the next piece of equipment we're going to look at here is the drill press. Same thing. We got a green on and a red off. Say as you're drilling through and the piece gets hung up on the drill bit, starts spinning around like crazy, do not try to grab it. Okay, just reach over and push the red button for off. Okay, if the drill is not long enough to get down to the piece, you can adjust the table with this crank right over here. You're just going to turn the crank, and what's going to happen is that's going to raise and lower the table. Okay, so it's going to raise and lower the piece to the drill bit so it has enough room to get all the way through the piece. In this vise here, the vise is what holds the piece stable while it's being drilled. In the bottom here, it's just two rails. So say if you're going to be drilling a pressure box, you're going to need to cut a little thin strip of metal to go across here, because otherwise the pressure box will fall down in between these two. Okay, so on the pressure box project, get a little thin strap of metal and put in there across the two pieces, then put the pressure box into the vise. Okay, the vise clamping is pretty much the same as the chop saw. You're going to index this forward, push this forward, and lock it down into place with this lever. Yeah. You would slide the piece under the drill bit where you want it marked. Okay, once the piece is in the vise, we're going to take the vise grips. And you have your mark lined up, the drill bit where you want it to be drilled. You're going to take the vise grips and clamp this vise down so that it can't spin around once the drill bit goes through the piece. Okay, if we're drilling this size drill bit, you actually want to make a pilot hole first, or do a center mark with a punch so that the drill bit doesn't walk off. But just for these video purposes, we're just going to drill a hole with what we got. So we're going to push the green button on, grab the handle, put it down. So there's the hole in the piece. Be careful, some of the chips are hot, probably a little bit sharp, but that's all we got. Okay, so for changing out a drill bit, we're going to take this chuck key. It's usually stored in the back here, right here in this little hole. We're going to take the chuck key, we would put it in here, push on it to turn the chuck open. Okay, the drill bit falls out. And say we were to need another size drill bit. Okay, then we would take our other drill bit, Put it back in. I turn the chuck, take the chuck key, and tighten it up. Once in a while, the drill bit wants to slip, so you would have the chuck key. Maybe you tighten up all 3 spots, and sometimes that'll help the drill bit stay in there a little bit better. So that's how to change out the drill bit. Okay, another piece of equipment is the shear. The first thing we do when operating the shear is figure out how thick of a piece of metal we're going to cut. So we have this right here. We're going to take this gauge, put it on there until we find the right thickness of what we're cutting. So what we have here is 0.234. We can see it on the camera. 234, we're going to go up to this gauge. And we look up here. 0.234 is just a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so decimals you can figure it out mathematically and see exactly what it is. But we're going to go just shy of 1/4 inch for this shear. So the first thing you do is pull this red button out. That turns the shear on. The next thing you want to do is set your rake. So we're going to take our lever and go down past 1/4 of an inch and then come back up to it. Okay? So right at 1/4 inch. That's this lever right here, rake up and rake down. The next thing you're going to do is set your knife gap. The knife gap, if you look up here, it depends on which instructor you have, but they're going to tell you knife gap. All the way down is a 1/16 for a 16 thick, and all the way up is 3/8 of an inch thick. If I was cutting 1/4 inch on here, I'd be somewhere in this neighborhood, right about here for 1/4 inch thick. And I'll draw on the board what a knife gap is and what the rake is in more detail. The next thing we're going to do is find how long of a piece we're going to cut. So this here is set up to cut 2 inches long. Here's 4 inches long, 6 inches long, 3 inches long, 5 inches long, 6 inches long again. Okay, so if we're going to cut 6 inches, we're just going to hit find it, start, and the shear will automatically move to 6 inches. When it goes from run to position, that little light there jumped, then you know you're ready to go. It's 0.5999. You're only 1/1000th of an inch off. Sometimes it gets hung up, and you can give it a little tap on the back of the fence, or I'm sorry, on the back of the stop, to make it move that extra little bit if it gets hung up. This gauge, by the way, gets hung right here, so it doesn't go in your pocket at the end of the night. Okay, so say that the number wasn't on here that you wanted to cut. Say you wanted to cut 5.5 inches. You would hit enter to clear it. 5, 5, 0, 0, and now it reads 5.5 inches. You would enter it back into the computer and then hit start to move it. Okay, there it went from run to position, so we're good. The next thing you're going to do to cut the piece, here's our 1/4 inch piece. We're going to put it tight up against the fence and slide it all the way to the back. Make sure it's still tight up against the fence. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is hold down both buttons. We're going to push this button and this button at the same time and keep pushing them until you hear the piece fall off. Okay, this here is the guard. You never want to stick your fingers under the guard. There's hydraulic feet that come down and hold the piece steady. If you were to have your fingers under here, it'd probably smash them right off. So again, this guard, your fingers never go past the guard. If something gets hung up back there, you need another piece of metal to slide it through. Otherwise, you can push on it with another piece of metal, but never put your fingers under the guard. Okay, the last thing we're going to do to shut it off is just push the red button, and it shuts everything down. Okay, the next piece of equipment we have here is the belt sander. If we're going to be sanding something, we want to leave it laying flat on this table. if you were to sand something and you start picking this piece up, it could get sucked down between the guard and the piece, then it goes shooting down through, and what happens is it cuts the belt, and the belt rips off here, and goes sailing all the way across the floor and gets stuck under that welder. So for this, whenever you're going to sand something on here, make sure you're not wearing your gloves, because it could suck your gloves down into there too. Okay, so to turn this machine on, we come over here. Again, it's a green and red button. Green means go or on. So we're going to push the on button. Make sure when you're sanding, you leave it flat on the table. And if you need to round the corner off, not too much pressure, just enough to do the sanding. When you're done, it goes off, the red button. Okay, to adjust how the belt runs onto the track is this knob right here, and that'll control how the belt runs left and right on the track. Again, this piece lays flat onto the table. Push it up against the wheel. And don't push the piece down in there like this at an angle. Leave it on there flat if you have to. Adjust the table to get the angle that you need. Okay, when you're done, just make sure you turn the switch off.
The acetylene pipe cutter, turn your acetylene and oxygen all the way up. They are good to go.
How far do you open the acetylene bottle?
Acetylene go, today I'm running at 10.
But how far do you open the bottle?
Quarter turn.
Sounds good. How about the oxygen?
All the way.
Sounds good. Then we move over here. This torch head should already be set up if nobody's screwed with the dials in the back. So what's the first thing you turn on?
Get the ignite. Take your igniter.
Okay, so you turn on the ignite switch, light it up with a striker, then you move it over the top of the pipe.
Put on fast roll, heat up the pipe, get it nice and hot.
How long do you go around with this?
5-10 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so when we get ready to cut this, there's an ignite. Turn on the igniter. Fast roll, that's what he's doing now for preheating the pipe. Then there's going to be a cut roll. And the cut roll is actually going to force oxygen through the molten puddle to actually do the cutting. At that time, there's a speed adjustment, faster and slower. So if the pipe is fusing back together as he's cutting it, it's going too slow. It's fusing back together, so you got to increase the speed by turning the dial up. So what he's doing now is making a heat ring. He's going to index the blade forward, punch a hole to begin with, and then roll the cutting torch back into the heat ring so it makes a nice cut. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, so he punched the hole. You can kind of see there that he moved it back just a little bit. So that way when it comes around again, there won't be any little divot where he started. There he is, right there. That's the dude. Watch out for that guy. Magnum.
Okay, get to work. Get to work.
Okay, so there the flame's cut and we started, we punch a hole, and we move it back so when it comes all the way around it doesn't leave a divot where it started. Okay, and there's the finished cut. Just a little bit of slag on the end. We can clean that